In the heart of Willow Creek, there lived three adorable pets with their kind owner, Mrs. Parker.
Benny, the bouncy beagle puppy, wagged his tail with joy at the very sight of a ball.
Whiskers, the clever tabby cat, loved nothing more than curling up by the warm fireplace.
Nibbles, the timid hamster, found comfort in scampering through his colorful tunnels.
One sunny afternoon, Mrs. Parker decided to bake her beloved pets their favorite treats. The aroma of freshly baked goodies wafted through the air, making their mouths water with anticipation.
Benny jumped with excitement, his tail wagging furiously.
Whiskers stretched lazily, anticipating the sweet reward.
Even Nibbles peeked out from his cage, his tiny nose twitching.
Mrs. Parker arranged the delicious treats on a plate, her heart filled with love for her furry companions. She knew how much they adored her homemade treats. Before leaving for her afternoon stroll, she reminded her pets to be good and not touch the treats until she returned. With a final wave, she stepped out, leaving the pets alone with the tempting plate of treats. The moment Mrs. Parker closed the door, Benny, unable to resist the allure of the treats, inched closer to the plate. The aroma was simply irresistible. His tail wagged excitedly, and he let out a small whimper of desire. The treats looked so delicious, and he longed to gobble them all up.
"Benny, we should wait for Mrs. Parker," advised Whiskers, her eyes twinkling with wisdom. "Remember what she said? We must be patient."
Maybe just one, Nibbles suggested, his voice barely a whisper. He was as tempted as Benny, but knew they should wait.
Benny, torn between his desire and his conscience, paced back and forth. The aroma of the treats filled his senses, making it almost unbearable to resist. He whined, his paws tapping impatiently. The treats seemed to beckon him, promising a burst of flavor with every bite. Unable to resist any longer, Benny crept towards the plate, his nose twitching. Whiskers, her resolve crumbling, joined him. They decided to share just one treat, convincing themselves it wouldn't hurt. However, one treat led to another, and soon they were indulging in a feast, their initial hesitation forgotten.
Nibbles, watching from his cage, couldn't resist the temptation either. He scurried out and joined his friends nibbling on a small treat.
The sweetness of the treats was overwhelming, and soon the plate was empty, except for a few crumbs. With full tummies, the pets suddenly felt a pang of guilt. They had disobeyed Mrs. Parker and devoured all the treats.
Benny whimpered softly, realizing their mistake.
Whiskers tried to hide behind the empty plate, shame washing over her.
Nibbles scurried back to his cage, his tiny heart pounding with fear. The click of the door startled the pets. Mrs. Parker was back. She smiled, looking at her furry companions, but her smile faded as she noticed the empty plate.
"Who ate all the treats?" she asked, her voice filled with concern rather than anger.
Whiskers, mustering all her courage, stepped forward. "Mrs. Parker, we are sorry. We couldn't resist and ate all the treats. It was wrong of us to disobey you."
Benny, his tail tucked between his legs, nodded in agreement, while Nibbles peeked from his cage, his nose twitching nervously.
Mrs. Parker listened patiently to their confession. She then patted their heads gently. "It's good that you owned up to your mistake," she said. "While it's important to be patient, honesty is equally important."
The pets wagged their tails, relieved and grateful for their kind owner. They learned a valuable lesson that day. Patience is indeed a virtue, but honesty is the best policy. Mrs. Parker, true to her word, baked them another batch of treats the next day, reminding them to be patient. This time, they waited eagerly, their tails wagging with anticipation, proving that they had learned their lesson well.